What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to Split Screen D&D, the show where we are attacking all things Dungeons & Dragons from both sides of the screen. My name is Tom Quinn, resident Dungeon Master here at Modern Myth.
And I'm Josh Winans, resident player character here at Modern Myth.
And we have a very, very special 10th episode of Split Screen D&D. For one, we've made it this far.
Yeah.
You know, most people, I don't think anyone ever expected that we'd go 10.
No.
I think there's only like 8 podcasts in history that have ever gone to 11. So
I know. So, I mean, we're already the top echelon of podcasters.
I think it's fair to say that we are number 9 in the world.
I think it's like the Joe Rogan show and then us.
I think that's probably
that's accurate.
That said, I think for top 10s, we made a decision that every 10th episode we're going to be doing a top 10 list. And this top 10 is monsters of Dungeons and Dragons. Very, very exciting topic.
Yeah, love it.
And hopefully we're going to be looking at these entries. So the way we organized this is we each selected our top 5s. Neither of us knows.
I have no idea what he picked.
No idea. He has no idea.
Yeah, they're probably all like...
I have a pretty good sense of everything that he picked because that's just how I roll. No, yeah. I have no idea what he's got. He has no idea what I've got. And we're going to go through those. And what I'm really hoping is that as we're unveiling these, we'll still be able to maintain a little bit of that kind of both sides of the screen.
Yeah, we can...
certainly, if ever there was a fulcrum between the dungeon master and the players, you would think it would be those things that I am instantiating into the world that you guys are eagerly awaiting to destroy and collect their loot and
sweet loot and XP. Well, we don't do that, but yes. But yeah, we'll just want to crack off.
I think let's jump right into it. Before we jump right into it, if you guys have been following along on this journey here at Split Screen, if you've been doing so via podcast, thank you so much. We appreciate you. We are seeing those numbers increasing daily, so that's
exciting.
huge.
Thank you.
If you have not yet hit that follow button, it means a ton to us. Or subscribe, or depending on which platform you consume your podcasts on. On the YouTube side, you guys pretty much know it at this point.
Hopefully.
But the like, comment, and subscribe is invaluable. And like I said, we really want to see my one wish thus far is just seeing more engagement.
That's what I'm thinking.
Section.
Comments like, hey, what's your favorite monster? I'd be like, hey, your monsters that you chose suck, but tell us why. You know?
Yeah. Post your own top 5 lists so we can have a full-on internet brawl. That's what the internet's for.
Yeah, Flame Wars. Absolutely. Yep. Bring it on.
That aside, I think let's just jump right into it. I think kick us off, sir. It's only fair. It's so infrequent that the player
I don't know how I feel about this.
I
don't know. Usually you make the first move, if you know what I'm saying. But
it is Tuesday.
It is Tuesday. So my first monster that I chose, I think all of mine are actually from the monster.
Goblins are weak, dude. Why was that on your favorites list?
What?
Oh, never mind.
No. But it is a wild card because it is so weak and not one would naturally think of as a enemy. I went with Flumphs.
Flumphs, okay.
Flumphs.
And there was no criteria that required it be an enemy outright.
It's a monster, and Flumphs are monsters.
Give me your rundown. Why the lovable Flumph?
This is not something to kill, and that's it's just a monster. So it's not something I wanted to fight. I just think they're so interesting. So those who don't know what Flumphs are, think jellyfish that have psionic abilities. They have telepathy. They live in the most horrible place in the material plane, I think, the Underdark, where literally everything is trying to kill you. I don't think there is like one nice thing in the Underdark except for Flumphs. Really good creatures. They can read your mind. They feed off your thoughts, which is kind of cool, but they don't hurt you. It's not right. Their diet usually consists of mind flayers, and they don't like that very much. So they're actively trying to get rid of the mind flayers. So in my mind, this is such a cool creature because as a player in the Underdark, to have one ally or one thing that can help you out is so cool. And it's just such in the most horrible conditions, there's like this very weak. I think it's like an 8th critical rate. Yeah,
1/8
CR rating. It's ridiculously low. But it survives and it can like help you out. There's also part of me that's kind of evil that kind of hopes that the party like it's in the Underdark. Everyone's running at 1,000%. Everything that they encounter is dead. So they come across like a enclave of Flumphs and just fucking murder them all.
And that gives you a pretty good sense of
That's my sense of humor right there.
I put down in the comments in a traditional alignment scale, where does that leave you?
That's
Wanting
chaotic
to
evil
murder
right there.
Flumps is
Well, if you don't know, and you're in a, so it
No,
could be like
that's
the
fair.
dying breath of the last Flumph. We could have helped you, you know.
yeah, I could see it. I will say I think as creatures go, very interesting creatures.
Yes.
Certainly a stark juxtaposition coming off of literally everything else in the Underdark.
Yes.
As a DM, I kind of hate them.
Why?
I kind of hate.
Why do you hate Flumphs?
I
They're so cute.
I mean,
Their colors change with their emotions.
yeah. Here's the thing: is I could absolutely see running them because again, in the interest of contrast in a space that is just encounter after encounter, it's narratively you could inject something there that's got kind of a positive or an upper. But if you wanted an actual creature encounter in that space, outside of the Underdark, you've got a plethora of creatures that could reasonably engage with the party in a non-combative way.
Yeah.
That is a much taller order in the Underdark.
Yes.
The Flumph would obviously be one to do it. I think they actually do make for a really, there's some very interesting narrative and story hook stuff that you could do in a space where kind of the one thing that isn't trying to kill you has to have a little bit of clout, a little bit of credence would be given if they come to the party going like, here's what I need, good sir.
Right. That's how I imagine Flumphs too. Is that kind of like super polite,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they have to be the most polite. I think the most polite creature.
Yeah.
In the entirety. Any last thoughts on Flumph?
I get you don't like them, but I just think they're just super neat.
Yeah.
I really like Flumphs.
Well, I definitely think they're a cool creature. I think I can see why they'd end up on a top 5 list for very like.
And this is a wild card. Like this is one I like. No one would see the Flumph coming.
Yeah. I definitely think probably no one saw the Flumph coming.
Yeah.
And here it is. Bam.
Yeah. If you don't like it, write it in the comments. And Flumphs are awesome. I don't care what you say.
Excellent.
All right, sir. I'm excited. What's your 5, man?
Pivoting over to something a little less adorable and
like everything else,
a little less kind. My number 5 is coming in as the Gibbering Mouther.
Okay. I don't even know if I know Gibbering Mouthers.
So envision for me a blob with just an untold number of mouths and serrated teeths and just babbling constant, insane nonsense. The main reason that they made my list is I don't think, and I actually don't think the Gibbering Mouther is a great example of this. I don't think 5th edition has done a great job of including rules as written creatures that impose a feeling of psychosis on
psychological horrors.
Yeah, there's definitely creatures that do psychic damage and are horrible but the mechanics they haven't done a great job of laying out mechanics that express what that experience must be like for a player to be in that state. But the main reason it landed on the list is we have kind of this amorphous horror that can squeeze in through tiny places. Again, this kind of emanation of just constant psychotic babble, which most specifically made the list because at low levels, which it is, it's a CR2 creature.
Okay.
That's a double-edged sword. I'm going to get to that in a second. That for a low-level party with a failed, I think it's a DC 10 on a failed save.
Okay.
You just flat out don't get to decide your turn anymore.
Does it control you, or
it's based on a D8 dice roll?
Okay.
At which point you may just stand there and do
That's kinda
nothing.
cool, a random
you
table?
may just wander around. You may just attack something randomly
That's
around
kind
you.
of neat, especially from a DM standpoint.
Yeah, it's really cool. The main reason it's only landing on my number 5 is because I love that feeling. I love the feeling of imposing some scatteredness onto a party. But at a CR2, it's got this kind of oddly exotic feel that just doesn't feel quite right at that level of play to me.
That's what I was thinking, because it reminds me, like, I forget the term. Like, the Mind Flayers are kind of this. The Beholders, they're like, there's a term for them. They're not beasts. They're not celestial beings. They're like aberrations.
Aberration?
No. Aberrations. So is it an aberration or is it like a slime? What kind
I believe it is, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And you're right. Aberrations are not very low level things. Usually those are the more horrors and the nightmares. Kind of like.
And so I think it's one of those deals that you'd really have to shoehorn it in kind of a I could certainly see maybe a town that has kind of a small town or outpost that's kind of been driven mad because one of these things slinked in the night and it's holed up in a lavatory somewhere, just sitting there, and the people are just kind of acting and going. There's some cool adventure stuff you could do with it.
I like that. Yeah,
but at that level of play, by the time when I'm really feeling like what I want to do is impose some psychosis onto the party. By that point, I would need so many of them for it to be a challenge that they don't feel like a creature that scales really, really well. So
or could you do like could it work with another creature?
Well, I certainly have taken conceptually. I mean, and this is what the great thing about monsters in really most tabletop RPGs is. I mean, it would be very easy to homebrew scale him up to something
that's true.
Or I guess kind of. Do some tweaks and scaling, but thoughts and feelings, low level. There's some reasonably heavy imposition there by way of. That's only DC 10,
right?
At your low levels, at a level 2 or something like that.
It depends.
That could be
is it intelligence? Ooh, there's not many things that go after intelligence, so that's kind of an interesting thing. I think it'd be really interesting. I don't think it'd be I wouldn't again at level 2. I don't know its HP or anything. I imagine its AC is ridiculously small.
Yeah. It is not a robust combatant. It is a controller above all other things.
So as a player, if I just run across in a dungeon, I don't think it'd be that interesting. But if I like you're like, hey, there's people in this town are acting weird, and then you discover that it's a
right.
That would be.
I think it would really be best used at that level of play. As kind of the end of a mystery.
Yes.
And the answer is this kind of weird abomination that seems out of place given the fact that you're a newer adventuring party.
Very much. So in that case, I could see just running across in a dungeon, it's missing out unless you upscale it.
Yeah. And visually, it's always been a top for me. I love the art associated with it, but it really does. It's not something I look at and immediately go like, cannot wait to run this at the table. For that reason, it's only coming in at number 5.
Right.
But unless you have anything else on that, I'm going to pitch it back to you, sir, with the number 4. Oh,
that was a close one.
That was close. Saved yourself.
All right. So, my number 4. So I have a couple low levels. Next one is a low level, but it's actually a monster.
Okay.
And Kobolds.
Okay. I'm not going to give you the same flack for Kobolds. I really do like Kobolds.
Yeah.
Hit me with it.
All right. So from a lore standpoint, they worship dragons, greedy, all that good stuff. They run in packs, which can make them very interesting. But they're, I think, a challenge rating of a quarter. Like, again, these are very low level characters. But what I really like about them is the trap making that they're known for. I think we've talked about this earlier, not in the split screen, but I think they're called Tucker's Kobolds. Mm-hmm. So for those of you who don't know the story, I think it was a Vietnam vet. Was a DM, and he ran across Kobolds and realized, they're trap makers. I know a thing or two about traps, and made them ridiculously hard. And so hard that even a higher level party was challenged.
Right, they were outscaling. Well, they're punching way above their weight class.
Which that there's if that's how you want to run them. But even at low level, I think at low levels is where they really shine. And the reason why is because we've been talking about this lately in D&D 5e. Social and combat are really brought to the forefront, but exploration is often left behind. And what better way to teach the party how to properly explore and how to figure out traps, how that whole pillar works, than an enemy low level that's their specialty.
Yeah, I love it. I love it as a great segue for whether they're new players to the hobby altogether, or even just you're kicking off a new campaign with new characters.
Right. So
I love the notion of being able to create where the exploration is kind of the enemy. That if the kobolds are doing their job right, I mean, they can certainly engage in an outright skirmish.
But they're not living to their full potential if you do that.
Right.
I don't think.
And I think you hit the nail on the head. If you're running kobolds, kobolds are really a creature that when the fight comes, if you have not depleted the party to some extent with kind of I don't know if trickery is the right word, but just kind of the wit of the little bits of trap making here, and whatever circles you've had the party running in trying to engage with these things. I really like that. Yeah.
And it's also, as a player, it's one thing that I think is common items are usually never used much, and we aren't as much as we used to. But like all the traps kobolds make are probably you could recreate it as a player, so maybe it gets them thinking like, how can we use traps? How can we ambush?
Certainly.
So and also the last creature you just mentioned, the what was it? The creeping mouth.
Oh, Gibbering Mouther.
Gibbering Mouther. The kobolds often use other creatures in their traps, so maybe it's that guy with kobolds would be a freaking. That could be killer.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think like you said, they cut with this double-edged sword of being tricky and kind of sly in their own right, but in outright combat, giving the players that reward of like, finally I got you cornered, you little bastard. And then it's nothing at all. And then they get to feel the reward of feeling powerful in combat, which generally is the case. I do think that kobolds are, I mean, when I say scalable, I still mean low-level scalable, but because they're kind of a numbers-oriented enemy, there's some cool, I think, more scalable stuff you could do, even into kind of the...
And pack tactics shouldn't be like, you can get some really crazy numbers with pack tactics on a kobold.
I believe Wizards is removing that from I think they might be removing pack tactics.
Are you serious?
Yeah. They're doing some interesting things as we move towards.
Okay, no, make them less interesting. That's
but
cool.
I as a DM, I couldn't agree more.
Okay.
Kobolds,
hey, I did one right.
Your other one definitely was wrong.
Flumphs are awesome.
Flumphs are wrong.
Flumphs for life.
No, I think well, and I actually think there's a lot of players and DMs out there who will agree. When you're looking at low-level monsters, there's kind of a handful of prescription monsters. You've got your goblins, you've got kobolds, you've got
Knowles, which was almost one of them. I love Knowles.
So it's just I think kobolds definitely are a more, for the reasons you outlined. There's a little more meat on the bone to play with there from an exploration standpoint.
Yes.
The other interesting thing is they are certainly a creature that is more readily or more ready to treat with the party than likely a band of goblins.
They're cowards, so maybe you could barter with them. So which could also creative playing as well could play into it.
Yeah.
Sure.
And I've heard about some like homebrew systems in which like you have alliances in major cities with kobolds who handle they're the janitors, they're the messengers, they're having their needs met, and kind of it would be a lot harder to go find a dragon somewhere to appease and be ruled over as a tyrant.
Usually doesn't go well for him anyway.
Right. I'm all for kobolds on the DM side. I mean, I think the reasons you laid out are strong ones from the player side.
I'm really curious about your number 4 because I didn't know your number 5, so I'm really hoping I know your number 4.
I don't think you're gonna know my number.
God damn. All right.
And I'm gonna reference my notes for this one because there's a number of reasons why. My number 4 is the Shadow.
You're right. Yep. Don't know it.
And it's mainly it is my number 4 because I think it is one of the most potent threats at low level.
Okay.
I think it's a handle with care from a DM standpoint. If you're not interested in TPK, handle with care.
Okay.
Especially given some of their lore, which we'll get into in a moment. But we'll get into straight away, or at least part of the lore.
Yeah.
Effectively, a shadow is kind of an undead visage, the shadowy visage of a former explorer.
So it's a spirit, pretty much.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, there is actually a spirit as well. I mean, so there is some, but effectively in terms of the way they propagate, and this is where I think it gets particularly interesting, is when a good aligned character is killed by a shadow.
Okay.
In, I believe it's an hour later. It could be, it might be longer than that, but some period of time later, a shadow arises, which is the shadow of that character. So it would be a great way to introduce a big warning sign if the players understood the lore of you're entering this space and it's like, holy crap, like whatever these things are nuts. And if I understand the lore, props to those DMs out there who have fed them some, some of this lore. It would be many other people. You're not the first ones here, so that's kind of how they come into existence.
Okay.
What makes them, they are a challenge rating 1/2. Okay.
Damn. Okay.
1/2. And I'm going to reference my notes because I don't want to get this wrong.
Yeah.
But we are talking about resistance to acid, cold, fire, lightning, thunder, bludgeoning, piercing, and slashing from all non-magical weapons.
Jesus.
So basically resistance across the board. They've got, I think, immunity to poison and necrotic as well.
Okay.
So
damn, a lot of immunities.
At half. And most importantly, they have, what is the name of the ability? They have a strength drain ability.
Oh no.
Which, when dealt damage, you are rolling a die 4. There's a save involved, but you're rolling a die 4.
Okay.
If you fail the save. And you take that many points of damage to your strength attribute.
Oh.
Yes. And
once it gets negative, what happens?
If you become 0 in strength, you die and you become a shadow. And it's that ability that ultimately propagates new shadows. At CR 1/2, I mean, if you can imagine being hit, if they had the jump on you and they're no slouch as far as initiative's concerned. If they got the jump on a strength-based character, the rest of the fight could be ruined for that character.
They'd be running.
And moreover, it's a very interesting dichotomy because you have strength-based characters who that's a big deal to get hit by that. Mm-hmm. But because strength is kind of your life total relative to that, a wizard who maybe has a strength of
like 6
8,
or something, in
2 hits could be done. That could be it.
Oh my
Another big reason why I really like the shadow is in terms of where you could instantiate it, where you could introduce it. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty versatile creature. It is. I mean, it's technically undead, but in terms of you could be in some old creepy manor and you're going for this kind of horror vibe.
Yeah,
you could be in a murder dungeon. You could be, these shadows could be the bodyguards to some necromancer who has all of these have kind of been raised as so there's a huge amount to be said for kind of the versatility and where you could employ them. Mm-hmm. Give me your thoughts as a player on a 1/2 CR that's bringing that kind of punch.
That shouldn't be a half CR in my mind. I don't know what it takes to hit, so but just in my mind, this is a monster you want to set up because, and again, at this level, you're not expecting this.
Yeah.
So as a DM, it would be really nice if you could put some warning signs, like maybe the room before they encounter the shadows. There's some warnings written on the wall, the shadow eats your soul.
Yeah, I think it would be a great way to find find bodies of prior party members or other adventuring parties who have been lost in these catacombs and with some notes about it. I definitely one thing I also really like about it is I think it's one of the few places that the undead have kind of retained the potency that they were so feared for in early editions. This really does feel more akin. It's still nothing compared to the
you're not losing levels, dear God.
But it is a deal where I kind of like that. I think I'm glad that not every undead in the game is that way, because I like running undead and sometimes I don't want a challenge to be you guys are going to have to go get fully restored after this
Right, go
fight.
see a cleric and spend thousands of gold. Yeah.
But so that's definitely one of the elements that I really do enjoy about it. Is it top 5 worthy from a player standpoint?
One thing I like about it is it really flips people like the party's usual roles. So usually you have your strength-based fighters run in front and other characters running back. Dex characters might really shine here,
Absolutely.
Where they might be the front people because they could take okay, I can still do my damage with Dex.
Right.
Because Dex is God stat in D&D 5e, evidently.
Yeah.
But, I think it'd be interesting. It's a little scary. Like, when you say that, it's like, geez. And to die. It's not making death saving throws. It's death.
Yeah, it's
at a half CR.
That is how it reads, anyways. Again,
Okay.
that would probably come down to the DM whether you are now making death
Yeah, be
saving
careful
throws.
with that, especially as especially with new players. Jeez, that just.
And I think that's a great way. If the rules is written intend that you are just dead, no saving throws, that would be a great way to be able to homebrew that monster so that it's a little less punishing if you've got an early party engaging or something like that.
Yeah.
But
no, so dude, it definitely fits on a freaking deadly, especially for a half CR.
Yeah,
jeez,
it's a dangerous one, and it's definitely, like I said, purely for its combat instantiation and kind of the weight that such a subtle creature, and by nature of being kind of incorporeal, it can also go almost anywhere, which is kind of
also scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much.
All right,
Okay.
we're into the top 3s here now, so it's
right.
time. It's time. The kid gloves are coming off.
So yeah, my first creature was a CR 8th. My second one was a CR quarter. I'm gonna double check here to make sure I say this right. I brought my notes because I'm that kind of guy.
You got to note it up.
Gotta know it. All right. The next guy is a CR 17. So we took a little bit of a jump.
Bit of a jump there.
So the next creature, I'll give a little introduction because now I'm starting to these are some monsters.
Right.
I think a very overlooked one, and I think it's unfair. The reason why is such a popular character in so many D&D 5e, and often the BBEG, is the Lich. And it's a fantastic monster. That's not who it is. But because it's just, you see it a lot. And it's a fantastic monster. It's a great monster. But the one I think that over gets looked is the Death Knight. And that's my number 3.
I thought about the Death Knight. Okay. All right, lay it on
now,
me.
granted, I
Lay
might be
it
a little
on me.
biased because I'm running a paladin, so there's that interesting.
There's some very cool lore. I really like the Death Knight.
So the lore wise is there's a couple different versions of the Death Knight. Some are just like a holy warrior got resurrected by some abyssal lord or something like that. That's fine. The one I like is the fallen paladin, the one who died betraying his oath.
Right. Basically.
Yeah, it's step beyond Oathbreaker in my mind. It's not just like, oh, I broke my oath. It's more like you just totally went the other direction.
Right. Yeah, I think you have truly forsaken who you were in life.
Right. It's a big deal.
Yeah.
Which is just really cool.
Any chance that we're going to see Kel as a Death Knight?
No, not Kel. Kel is fucking awesome. But
Death Knights are pretty awesome.
They're ridiculously awesome. I think they really shine as like the general of an undead army. Mm-hmm. If you look at the stat block, they're ballers. They have one ability, I think it's once a day, where it's like a 10d6 fireball, which is brutal. They're spellcasters and really good ones. They have like Destructive Wave. They have Hold Person. They like lots of good things. They nullify Turn Undead for clerics and paladins. I mean, they're really, really solid. But so mechanically, they're great.
Right.
But what I really like is the lore. Because they're. Did you know you can't kill a Death Knight?
I did not.
So the only way to get rid of truly kill a Death Knight is you have to. It has to be redemption. Somehow you have to redeem the Death Knight.
I mean, when you talk about a creature that has a built-in plot hook,
it's huge,
and that's something that. And there are a few creatures that really stand out that way. But I love that. I mean, what a cool way of introducing a party to a villain that they have to help if they want to defeat them,
which is really cool.
Which is a really cool dynamic. I love that. I really, really like that.
So that's the reason. I think most of my higher level picks are the lore. I just really love.
Well, there's so much good lore. I mean, that's one of the coolest part about just skimming Volos or Mordenkainen's or the monster manual itself. There's so much cool lore. I mean, it's a tall order to say, hey, pick 5 because there really are so many cool creatures. One thing you touched on with regard to the Death Knight that I really like from running a combat encounter, and you situated them well as this commander unit. That, I mean, they are very capable combatants in their own right, but they are almost more important as a support unit. They really function very differently to the way a paladin would function in the fight. I mean, they can hold the same role.
Cal's more support, but
I think that, well, and not just in the way that they support, like negating turn undead. That is a big that is the undead counter spell, if you will. You know, I mean, and with turn undead, especially, I mean, earlier editions with turn undead being such a potent ability because undead was such a feared enemy, that, you know, having a Death Knight standing in the ranks of a broader undead skirmish.
So one of my mental images is Army of Darkness when Evil Ash is laying siege. Like Evil Ash is a Death Knight. Ash is
you're talking about post face torch.
Yes,
Jaws.
That scene.
No, I think it's a great. There's a great tie there. I haven't seen that movie in way
we
too
need
long.
to watch that movie
we need to sit down
again.
and watch that movie.
Oh, it's a great movie.
Army of Darkness is great, and it's also the greatest. It's the best. It's just the best.
Especially with Anyway, we could talk about it for a while. So that is my number 3, Death Knight.
Death Knight. I wouldn't even begin to question it on a top 5. I think it's awesome. The part that really, I mean, I'm sure because I've read through the Death Knight lore. I'm sure at some point I must have read that's how you appease their anguished spirit.
You might be able to banish it for a little bit, but it will still reside. I used to read Dragonlance. I think they're making shows out of it. Let's see what they do with it. But there was a Death Knight, and they had to redeem, and the land was tied to him, so the land was cursed.
Right.
And they could only free the land after they freed the Death Knight. That was cool.
Yeah. And like I said, in terms of, I mean, as a DM, if you're not immediately going, there's a dozen things I could do with that right there.
I'd say so. And because I also don't like love liches. We're fighting where we're in our campaign. That's a great monster, but Death Knights shouldn't be overlooked.
Right. And I think that I do agree with you with your setup. I think the if you're talking about powerful undead, the Lich really has had more than their 15 minutes of fame. I can see why. I think they're a really interesting monster, but I'm really glad that you went with the Death Knight instead because, like I said, that little bit of lore that I plucked out of there's already got my gears turning on some cool,
start thinking things.
Cool stuff.
Number 3, what's yours?
My number 3. Do
I know this one?
I don't. Well, you're gonna know the creature for sure, but
okay.
I don't think you're going to. I don't think you would have guessed this on my list.
All right, let's.
Number 3 is on my list actually for a little bit of an oddball reason.
All right.
The Displacer Beast.
I love Displacer Beast.
I know the Displacer Beast.
Yeah.
And I'll say the Displacer Beast, as best I can recall, is the first Dungeons and Dragons illustration I ever saw.
Are you serious?
Ever.
So
the thing is, and I remember in my head as a kid, I was going like, "Oh my god, this must be the craziest shit," you know?
Right.
I went back and found that illustration.
You did
going into this talk.
Did it hold water?
It is horrible. It's not
the power of nostalgia.
Yeah. This is an old Advanced Dungeons and Dragons illustration of Displacer Beast, which basically looks like. I mean, I'm pretty confident if I took a crack at it, I would have ended up with something in this vein. No, so I will say it holds this nostalgic place in my heart. I really do think as a kid, I fixated on that illustration. But beyond that, they are just fucking cool. They are kind of to the same point that you talked about with kobolds. And it's a good reminder to DMs everywhere and to players that a head-on combat should only be one consideration when you're designing encounters and when you're walking into situations. You know, part of being an adventurer should be, holy crap, there could be anything anywhere in here. You know, just because there's not something screaming and running at you with a club doesn't mean that combat isn't already ensuing around you. You just don't know it yet.
Yeah.
And this Displacer Beast really fills that out in a really, really solid way. I mean, they're such a strong ambush predator.
Yes.
And what I love about them and running them is they're an awesome tag on to many other. You could have virtually any intelligent race,
right,
who through some lore manipulation of your own doing could have for lack of a better term, domesticated. And there is actually numerous lore, I mean, throughout the Feywild. I mean, the reason they were even driven into the material plane, and I mean, there's a bunch of, but interactions between them, I should say amicable interactions between them and other sentient beings are not unheard of. So they're a great tack-in to really spice up an otherwise straightforward combat. Is maybe the second round of combat is going through, and all of a sudden, out of the brush, two of these things come lurching out, and you thought you had the upper hand in the combat.
Right.
The beauty being that, and you'll appreciate this, you love the tactics.
I do.
You play the tank. Your job is to keep your people safe, keep your people healthy. They're going to come sprinting out of the brush, and they're going for the back line. They're going for those casters. And the two abilities that they really have is one, that makes them so potent against casters. This is why, I mean, if I was ever running them, it's like, I love the idea about a clan of mage hunters who have domesticated some of these things specifically for the purpose of
they would. Oh, they're terror to mages for sure. Wizards and
with them having the I don't remember the immediate name of the ability. Drop it in the comments because you guys are going to know.
Oh, you always know.
But they on a failed DC for that results in half damage. They never take damage, so they never take half damage on a failed DC. So that's a big time fireball. You saved, or I'm sorry, you failed. You saved. You know where I'm at. Okay.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
If you fail, you take full damage. If you save, you take half damage. If they save, they don't take the half damage. There's that. The displacement ability, or their this passive ability of displacement, they are always projecting a version of themselves. Not even a second version. Just you see them 6 or 8 feet away from where they actually are at all times, which means that unless they've actively been damaged, you've got disadvantage when you're. So they are really, really potent. When they come charging out of the brush, they're pushing towards your back line, and the people who are up front wanting to stop that from happening, one, they're going to have a hard time doing it out the gate. And then as the casters themselves begin trying to repel those attacks, a lot of those end up being, or I should say, especially a caster who is unaware of that ability. When they find out all of a sudden that
fireball doesn't work. Granted, these are it's probably a pretty low CR rating. I think.
CR I want to say is 4.
Oh, okay.
I would have to double check that.
So a level 5 wizard.
I should have actually marked those down.
Oh, you're good.
I will. We're in the video where I just said 4. I'm actually going to flash the actual CR on the screen because
there you go.
We'll do that because technology. But like I said, it holds a special place in my heart because it really I credit to some extent that illustration to really drawing me into the hobby at large. But I'm glad that it wasn't just a pretty picture. There's some substance back there. And if employed as the tools that they should be, they are a menace to a backline.
Especially when you're saying like you combine them with other units. Because I could see like, a brutal would just be like maybe a couple tanks and some archers. Oh, Jesus.
Well, and that's what I think is if you set up your standard skirmish, like I said, let's just run with the notion of a mage hunting outfit. Just some people who are anti-arcanist. a Displacer Beast isn't walking at their hip down at the path. The Displacer
No.
Beast travels full time in the brush.
Right.
You know, I mean, they still have their instincts.
I'm thinking
and-
like the raptors from Jurassic Park. you know?
yeah. I mean, these are some clever girls.
Right.
Is what
These
it
are
comes
some clever
down to.
girls.
And I think that really the cool thing about talking about creatures in D&D or monsters in D&D from a DM standpoint, I think it serves both sides. Is it makes the player more cognizant of what could be around every corner. And in so many cases, if you're thinking about it, it's not going to be standing there in the room waiting for you.
No, yeah.
So many of these creatures have been designed to be obscured in some way,
Right.
to present themselves as something they're not, to, you know.
Yeah, they're all living in this very dangerous world, and they've survived, and there's reasons why they've survived.
Right. So I love the notion of tacking
Yeah.
them in. They're a super versatile creature.
Yeah, I like it.
A great skirmisher for the back lines.
I like it.
Just an awesome all around tool.
And
And
you
they
can-
look badass.
they look
I
badass.
mean, you don't a tentacled panther basically.
Yeah, and you as a party could also maybe get a domesticated one, which is also pretty cool.
I certainly, if in my world there are people domesticating these things, don't see any reason why the party, given the right amount of gold and time invested, couldn't
Right.
also
Absolutely.
have one of these. I think that puts us on to the top two, sir. What you got?
Oh, all right. Number 2.
I'm wondering if we're going to overlap here.
No,
I don't.
we're not overlapping.
You don't think we're overlapping?
I don't
Okay.
think. Number 2,
All right.
solar.
We're not overlapping. Okay. All right. School me. I actually, I know that I've read through the stat block.
Okay.
But I will say it's not one I've ever fixated on. So
I like as far as the lore is concerned, I really enjoy I think it's called the War of Blood, which is the demons and devils and the angels and all that
yep,
stuff.
Blood War.
The Blood War. I really enjoy that lore. So the angels have always interested me. What I like about solars, for one, they're the highest. I don't know if I might be using Christian terminology here. The highest choir of angels. They're the most strongest of angels.
right.
Angels. Very rare. 24 exist. These serve good deities, and they are fucking powerhouses. Like, they only show up when cosmic problems are
Right.
happening. Like, reality is probably going to end. That's when you start to see solars.
Right.
And what I like about them is they are lawful good. And when I first thought of angels, like, oh, sweet, they're going to help. Always help. They're always going to be good. Maybe.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's going to be a Sodom Gomorrah fucking wiping the city off the map.
Right.
Which they are more than capable of doing.
And I would say if they're showing up, it's more apt that they're about to raise something than they are.
Yeah, when they're showing up, it's bad.
to pat you on the back and go like, try harder.
Yeah, no, those are like the lower divas, maybe. But yeah, it's because I also like gold. The dragons are also really interesting, and gold dragons are good, but they're lawful good. So the odds of them being, because they serve a higher purpose, they're not. You're nothing to them. Solars don't see your heroes as anything. You're less than ants. So when you think about them in that way, yeah, they're not going to show up and they're not going to, like you're saying, pat you on the back, and they're going to probably wipe out shit. So maybe the party's job, don't try to fight one. If you want me to go through their fucking abilities, they have a longbow that if they hit you, you make a DC check, and if your hit points are below 100 and you don't, you die.
It is a longbow. That is it Finger of Death, or is that
Is it
Disintegrate?
similar?
I can't remember. The wording is, it's basically if you have less than 100 hit points, you're just dead.
It's ridiculous, and they have they can blind you.
Longbow
They
of
can.
death.
They have flying swords. They can throw. I mean, they can teleport. They're ridiculously strong. So if you're thinking of fighting this thing, good. This is
This is top tier play.
This is we're
If- I mean,
talking level 20, 19. So in my mind, if you're especially lower level from an interesting, this is hey, don't raise this city. Like, how can you spare this city? Like, how can you convince the solar?
Right.
I think that's interesting.
Yeah, I think definitely if and with them being lawful good, they may be willing to treat with you. Albeit, like you said, it would be the equivalent of an anthill attempting to treat with you as you're walking by. But But certainly I think there's some adventure hook built into there. Knowing how powerful they are and how kind of a late game entity they are, I think they really stand strong as, let's say, an end game scenario where the party is deciding who in the heavens they are going to back in a giant pantheon wide war, where it's a deal where maybe that's a situation where they're having to treat with this being where it's like, here's the deal, we've seen that you have some chops, okay, like,
right,
come with me, you're with us now. And you go, no, I don't support that. Like, that's a tough fight to choose, because you could go, okay, we'll back them. I mean, you're at least supporting something that is good.
Yep.
But you may, again, I think narratively there's some really interesting stuff you can do there in terms of anytime I think, and this maybe is why I haven't honed in on them, is because inherently you were talking about higher tiers of play, unless they're purely a narrative edifice.
And I could see them definitely as a quest giver as well, maybe. Or something like
absolutely.
That.
But I think that there's that space for questions about what is good.
Yeah, it really, because lawful good, lawful stupid, whatever you want to call it, is full of, like, what's that? Like, I always remember of Donnie Darko. I was like, you stole the wallet. Do you give it back? I was like, well, what happens if you're starving to death? Do you steal the money out of it? Because then otherwise you're starving to death. Like, morality is gray. There are shades of gray.
Right.
You know? So yeah, it's hard to appease to that.
And I think the beauty of a character like that, I mean, to some extent, the beauty of playing a PC who is lawful good is there aren't shades.
There are not shades of gray.
There is what is lawful and what is good, and
know.
Everything else is black.
Yeah,
and I think that really epitomizes the interactions that a monsters maybe we'll keep with the term,
right?
But that a monster like that informs in the broader scenario.
There is one more hook I'll give you that I think you might find interesting. In the lore, there was one solar who was taken captive by it has to be a devil, is because it was a smart play, a devil prince, and he first tried to torture the solar to betray itself. He couldn't do it, couldn't break the solar. So instead he tricked it, and the solar fell. So you have a solar fallen angel. That is a crazy cool thing.
I love that. I love immediately locale. I love is like what is the place look like where this near perfect being
God stepped down from God.
Yeah. And I think there's, again, I mean, inherently that's just rife with all sorts of.
I just thought it was so cool, and I love the idea, because I always think of angels as, they're going to help you. Maybe,
yeah,
but
and I think that's one of the aspects of really powerful good entities is that I think they serve to illuminate that the good that they are talking about does not share, like we were talking about, a lot of the gray area that many good players espouse they are attached to as they move through the world. There are actions that they have taken throughout the campaign that get you have now been smited by a truly good being. Which again, I think in some regards there's interesting ties there. It's possible that there's even too much of that good thing,
That's an interesting question to provide.
I love it on the list. Like I said, it's definitely it's one. I don't know why I've never really fixated on. I think you definitely are more in the Blood Wars rabbit hole.
Yeah, I really enjoy that lore
than I am. But like I said, I'm glad you brought it to the table, because there's some interesting lore there that I didn't latch onto, and like I said, I'm actually finding this conversation to be particularly interesting in terms of drumming up some.
Oh Jesus!
Yeah, next session, solar,
fallen solar. Good luck.
Have you been good?
Yeah.
How good?
Yeah, we just
How
had
good?
that conversation like as our party. It was like, how are we good? Anyway, what's your number 2?
Solar will let you know.
I know, right?
My number 2, kind of as yours was, Kobolds, is an entire group. So not an individual. I guess
Right.
a lot of these have been, but to me, like a red dragon is kind of a red dragon, not all red dragon. You know what I mean? Certainly there can be, but
Okay.
there are some creatures that are more individual. If you said
Okay.
Demogorgon, that is a singular entity.
Right.
This is a group. It's one I have been fascinated with since as long as I've been playing the game.
Oh, I'm excited.
Illithids, mind flares.
Fuck Illithids, dude.
I absolutely love them for a bunch of reasons. I think they have
Scary as shit.
they definitely have some of the most kind of jarring lore in the entire and this is up against some very jarring.
It's surprising how deep the lore is because I went down that rabbit hole.
Yeah,
it is
and it's
very surprising.
Very, very interesting. I think because that is a rabbit hole, but the life cycle of Illithids is, I think, a very interesting aspect of their lore. That fundamentally a colony is controlled by an elder brain.
Mother brain. All I can think of is Metroid.
That elder brain basically exists in the spawning pool alongside all of the parasitic tadpoles.
God, that's so
and then those tadpoles, they will find a host for these tadpoles. And I believe I want to say it's 10 years it takes for a tadpole to get to the point where it can actually infect a host. Once infected, it's about 20 years for them to learn the ways of the Illithid as they are, I believe the term is ceramorphed.
Look at you. I did not know that.
I'll catch a correction in the comments, guaranteed. No,
It's pronounced Ceramorph.
I do think ceramorphosis is the process.
Okay.
The cool part about that process is, even though there's not a lot of lore explicitly detailing the consumption of, let's say, lesser intellectual beings, I just think from a homebrew standpoint, that is such an awesome road to go down. I actually I'm obligated to pivot for 1 second here, to give a bit of a shout out. So quick shout out to Prolific Illithic on Twitter. We've been chatting a lot about Illithids, and really helped to kind of reignite my passion for them. Growing up, like I said, they were always a very interesting enemy. I've been thinking about them a lot more. And Illithic has been kind of going down this path that I was just alluding to of what do other sentient beings look like when they have
That's a good question.
ceramorphed. So the book that he's got coming out is going to be really interesting. It's got all sorts of creatures that have been experimented on by the mind flayers.
Cool.
And,
Hey, good call. There's a lot there to work with.
Yeah, some really cool stuff.
Yeah.
So just a quick shout out. We've been chatting a bunch, and so this one, it made my list. Well, I was going to make my list anyways, but it was thoroughly reignited. So thank you very much, Prolific Illithic. But that process, and that's really actually what got me thinking about from a homebrew standpoint. There are so many cool things to say, like, well, what if a colony was able to infest a dragon? What does a dragon look like once it has been? What does it do once it's been?
Right.
A really interesting aspect of their lore as well is that even though they consume the brain itself, it's actually not the physical nourishment that nourishes them. It is the kind of psychic shock that the mind is going through as they're consuming it that actually nourishes them, which is why they tend to consume more intelligent beings. It's kind of the increased brainwaves. But that does pivot to the combat aspects. And this is one of the characters or one of the creatures that fits on my list for both lore and combat reasons. And I couldn't have my top two not fitting both of those pillars.
Yeah.
When you're talking about Illithids, you're talking about a very robust damage type. Psychic damage, probably one of the hardest damages
It's
to
I don't think there's is a resistance much.
unless you look in a box.
Unless you homebrew some shit. And
yeah.
my wife looked in a box evidently and got a +2, I think.
That was a die 100 table, and she snagged. No, she's got resistance to.
Jeez, well, let's hope. Well, I don't want to face Illithids. I don't.
We'll see. We'll see how.
Oh God, they're so scary.
But so in combat you have both. Well, a couple of things. You have a very robust damage type, and that's the backbone of the damage that they're dealing. But you also have with, I believe it's Psychic Scream. I'll have to double check the.
I don't know their stat block.
It could be Blast. It could be whatever the case is. I believe it's I want to say it's even a 60-foot cone. It's a big cone.
Jesus.
And it is a pretty gnarly save, and it is a stun. 1 minute.
1 minute?
1 minute. You do get a save on each turn, but
okay, but it could last, and especially if it's an intelligence saving throw.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is that in order for them to extract your brain, you have to be stunned. And effectively, if you're just standing there, the horror of being fully cognizant as those tentacles begin kind of winding around, and you can feel the digestive juices begin spilling on the back of your head and softening your skull.
You can stop now, dude.
Just a real. I mean, there's so much cool lore-wise, but they are also just a super potent enemy in their own right. A very nice, I think realistically, very nice mid-tier enemy, but we're talking about, I believe, a CR7, but that's one.
That's the thing, is they're never alone.
The thing is that generally speaking,
you have thralls too.
You've got thralls, you've got there's intellect devourers, there's all sorts of little cool aspects to the colony at large, and we don't have enough time to go into the whole colony.
That's because I want to.
Yeah, no, there is so much cool stuff going with Illithids.
I want to remind me, who's that guy you're talking to that's like really delving into this?
Oh, Prolific Illithid.
Prolific. There's a lot to. I'm really curious to see what he comes up with.
Yeah. I guess we've given him the shout out, but I will also say be tuning in the very near future. Illithic and I are going to be sitting down to talk about homebrewing creatures and encounters. Maybe even with a Illithid slant, who knows? But be watching for that on DM in the PM. Again, there's so much to go into with Illithids, but super potent combatants,
great
super
lore.
rich lore. I would say one of the deeper rabbit holes that you can go down,
because it used to be the most prevailing race in the entire
prior to
until they get
Gith
and
There's so much cool stuff.
So much cool stuff.
It's. I mean, we could actually do an entire episode on.
But I hate them.
We could do an entire episode on the Gith. Illithids.
If we want to start going into lore, because I'd love to do a Blood War episode, but that's number two.
Number two.
I respect the fuck out of that.
It's one that I even fear a little bit running it as a DM. I'm not even on the receiving end.
God, they freak the fuck out of me.
They are such a cool enemy.
Yeah.
But without further ado, any real quick words before we dive into number one, or should we just get right after it?
Let's save everything for after. So number one.
Number one.
So
what you got? Are we gonna have? We're zero overlaps here.
I don't think we're going to.
Okay.
My number one is in a similar vein to the Death Knight. Everyone thinks of Lich, right?
Okay.
And so here's Death Knight. My favorite creature is everyone thinks of Beholder, right?
Mm-hmm.
Super interesting character. I know. I understand why.
I think I know where you're going.
Aboleth.
Oh, okay. It was the Aboleth. Okay. No, well, you said Beholder. I actually thought you were going to pivot to a Death Tyrant, which is
also a really cool character.
Yeah,
no, I did not go with
no, Aboleth. I should have seen that. I mean, we even kind of, but yeah.
Aboleth is also personal because Kel ran into which. So first, let's go into the mechanical. They're interesting for sure. They live underwater pretty much. They can breathe above water. They're telepathic. Something cool. Once they have telepathic communication, they know your greatest desires. That's really cool.
Yep. From a DM standpoint, if you were running one that isn't just immediately trying to eat someone, one that's kind of found a higher plane of intelligence, some really cool stuff you can do there.
It's kind of one of those creatures that, as on paper, if it's just like, hey, we're fighting an Aboleth, I don't think it's scary. But once you start going into like the lair of the Aboleth, then shit gets real. Kind of like the
Right.
lair of the beholder. You don't fuck around with that.
Right.
So you could very easy to succumb and become a thrall once you grow gills and can no longer breathe above water.
Right. And that's my favorite ability of the Aboleth.
Which happens to my
and
character.
I actually don't
Well,
recall the name of it, but effectively this reverse drowning where you have to be in water to breathe. Here we go. Here's a stat block. Here's a stat block.
Is it the Mucus Cloud?
Yep. I believe everything in that cloud. I want to say it's for a minute or an hour. They can only breathe in water for
1d4 hours.
Holy crap! Yeah, I mean it's a monster,
brutal.
and it's such a the coolest part about it. Here's what I love about that ability.
Yeah.
Is the party realizes they're in the lair. They succumb. If just one of them succumbs to that, the party is in that fight, or they're abandoning that
one person.
Because that person is going to panic. They're choking. They're gasping. They have to go into the water.
Yep.
And now, not only are you fighting Aboleth, you are in an underwater skirmish.
Yeah.
I mean, it literally is
it's a
reaching out
nightmare.
and going, you are fighting in my house now.
Yes.
And it is such a cool combat wise.
I think it's really cool, and it's one that you will it's one of those that it's kind of like the Death Knight. You're very rarely ever going to just run into a Death Knight. Well, I shouldn't say that. But Aboleth, I think it really shines is when you start to make it like the end boss, but it's surrounded by people.
Yeah.
CR10, isn't that weird?
Yeah, it's a banger for
a CR10. I don't get it. But my by far favorite thing about Aboleth is the lore. The fact that they were around long before the gods, and the collective memory is so cool that they are born with all the memories of everyone. It's a hive mind. And they have that from before the gods came into the world.
Right.
It's just so cool. So if you run into one Aboleth, you've run into them all. And which has happened to my character. I ran into an Aboleth. Part of me wants to run into another. I don't know if it's going to happen, but if I do that, it has my knowledge.
Part of me wants you to run into the same Aboleth.
Even if I don't, what does it matter? Because they're all the same. And I love that they hate the gods. Because before the gods showed up, they were the gods.
Right.
And they've been planning for eons.
Yeah.
So I read somewhere, I don't know how true this is and how much you incorporate this. There is an Aboleth that is planning.
I know what you're going to say, but keep going with it.
There's an Aboleth that is planning has been burrowing and is going to take the surface and is going to collapse into the Underdark, into the Aboleth's realm, and then they get to control the surface. They will control the world again. Mm-hmm. That is so fucking cool. Oh, I love it. I love Aboleths. They're so neat.
Yeah.
And a CR fucking 10, older than the gods, have all the knowledge. Yeah, beholders are incredibly paranoid. Yeah, they're incredibly intelligent. They thought it through everything. But do they have memories from before the gods were born?
Not even the gods have memories from before the gods were born.
I know. So, I mean, it's just, it's so underrated.
I do think, and I think I think the cool thing is to start grabbing that lore and writing some really interesting adventure. I think creatures like that here's what I'll say. I completely agree with the creature on the list. I think Aboleths are awesome. Hence part of the reason. I mean, I already knew that you kind of liked them, so I was like, you know what? Oh, I got to throw in one of these.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of what makes them so cool, you have to have geeked out on their lore a little bit.
Yeah.
And if you just hand them to a party and go like, here's what's happening to you, things are going, and they don't have the like, it's real easy to not appreciate what you're standing in front of.
Right.
If you haven't. So again, it's one of those situations where as a DM, you really will do yourself a favor by starting to provide, even if it's, if there's a party that got wiped out where only one person escaped and there's some ranting guy and he's providing a little information that, they're reading literature about, ancient primordial entities or whatever it is.
Right.
it's not the kind of creature that as a DM you can just go like, this will make for an interesting encounter and just drag and drop it in. It's really one that you want to set up.
Yeah.
You know, but I completely agree that the lore, the payoff of how cool those encounters can be. And again, when you're talking about inviting players into that lair, and I'll say there are very few creatures who have a singular ability that kind of commands the
oh my god, too.
Now we're here and this is taking place.
Yeah, because like once that one, you're saying it, like once that one person it's on.
It's almost better that everybody does, because if one person does, now everybody's fighting and holding their breath. Everybody else.
Right.
If everybody succumbs to it, at least they can breathe in the water and they can all go and fight this thing.
Right.
So there's, I mean, maybe you've got water breathing, maybe you've got some who knows what you've got. But
damn, hey, 3.
2.
I'm only
max
on 2.
2.
I'm sorry.
Max.
I'm sorry, people of the internet.
2.
Yeah, and which a ritual of underwater breathing, which is one of the greatest rituals I think there is.
You got time for a ritual? When
you've got 8. It's an 8-hour duration.
No, definitely. But I'm saying your friend just is gasping for air.
You can cast it immediately. But yeah.
So you'll end up having and that's again, it's one of those deals where immediately you've demanded a spell slot. Right. Just
and
in
again,
combat. And
I don't think you're ever going to face an Aboleth by itself.
No, probably not. In fact, the coolest part about it is, when I always think about it, it's like as probably it's not the first thing to reveal itself. It's very intelligent.
Very intelligent.
But I love the imagery of, what is otherwise a pretty placid vista, and to have its thralls kind of begin coming out, or whatever. I mean, however you tie it in.
Yeah.
As a number one, I love it. I love the Aboleth.
I just think it's such a cool creature.
And I will say, if you had just said, like, just off the top of your head, what's the CR for an Aboleth? It wouldn't have been 10.
Would not have been 10.
It probably would have been a good 3 or 4 higher than that, at least. Yeah.
So it's one of those that punches above its weight, and it's the lore that I really enjoy about it.
And lore is awesome. Like I said, I think it thoroughly fits in both categories. There's some really interesting combat.
I'm just thinking about it. Most of my things are lore. My top 3 are lore.
I mean, most of, I'll say all of mine are lore.
Yeah.
Some of them are both.
Yeah.
I think that, well, I guess I should say the lore on the Shadow doesn't blow my mind.
But you could make it amazing.
Oh, you could do all sorts of cool stuff with it. But it's just what a juxtaposition at that level that it is.
Half CR. Anyway,
it's going to be very interesting because we are living in very, very different worlds on our number ones.
I'm excited.
My number one, it has been my number one for a really long time. And actually, it wrestled long and hard with Illithids, because Illithids were potentially my number one.
Okay, what do you got?
Knowles. I love Knowles.
They were almost made my list. Number one, though.
My number one.
Okay.
I have loved Knowles. I'll tell you why. I love Knowles for lore reasons. Let's get into the lore reasons first.
Okay.
And I gotta just because there's a couple names that are, but specifically by way of Knowles, I'm just gonna pull it up here so I can.
I don't. Yeah.
The coolest thing right out of the gate that from a DM perspective that I love is Knowles have almost equal footing in a bestial savagery and a human cunning.
Okay. Ooh.
And so if you're wanting to present a very intelligent, well thought out encounter,
which is most people don't think about. They are that intelligent.
They are. I mean, they're not an Aboleth. They're not a but they are smart enough to essentially plan any kind of skirmish that a human could plan.
Right.
And their physical prowess is substantial by comparison. So I love the duality there, that as a DM, if you're really wanting to lean into the savagery, the bestial nature of these things, you can imply that tone. You can really ratchet that down. If you just came off of a big skirmish with some other kind of nasty beast, and you're wanting something that's a little more intellectual, certainly they're capable of filling that. I think they are one of the most versatile creatures, period, in the game, for that exact reason, because I think they can apply both tones to combat. They are excellent combatants, and granted, low-level combatants. Yeah. I think they scale reasonably because they're also a creature that you can kind of scale by numbers, with a little bit of homebrewing and some of the leadership qualities in like a like a pack lord kind of a character.
Yep.
There's some really cool stuff that you could do there. But proficient in melee, proficient in ranged, pretty aggressive by way of their athletics, acrobatics, what have you, their ability to move around, engage the targets they need to.
Right.
So just purely in the combat space, it's not any one ability that draws me to them. It is the fact that from basically session 0, if you really wanted to, all the way through. I mean, you could be running, if you're playing them smart, you could probably be running them against probably a level 4 party if you had a mind to.
Yeah.
Level 5 party maybe if you had.
If they have cleric, the shamans and all that, absolutely.
Yeah, there's absolutely ways that you could do that. From a lore standpoint, there's a couple things. The nomadic nature is really cool, which means they can be showing up anywhere. Pretty much anywhere. I mean, they tend to be on the plains. They tend to be, I seriously considered running Knowles as a primary enemy.
I'm biting my tongue so much while you're presenting this because I also want to jump in. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, and don't hesitate. The big thing that I wanted to get to, one of the things that really grabs me about their lore, the worship of Yinogu.
Yep.
Which
I'm glad you looked it up.
That is just the whole dynamic between feeling as though this eternal hunger that's driving you forward is a blessing. That the rage and the violence that's pent up in you is a blessing. Like there is maybe no creature more or less self-aware, however you want to look at it, than the Gnoll, because all of these things that should be viewed as curses. Yeah. You have been cursed with just an unyielding hunger and bloodlust and savagery, and through their creed, that is their greatest gift because it drives them on to consume and kill and maim and slaughter. So there's that. What I really like about their lore are the spirit breakers, which are effectively the professional torturers in there when they've claimed slaves. So they bring them in. This is a really cool little bit of their lore. They bring these slaves into the space. They're given to spirit breakers. There's actually a Gnoll name for them, but I wasn't going to fuck with it. You're good. But it translates to spirit breaker. Cool. These people basically repeatedly torture these slaves until they have broken, or eat them. Those are their options. You break, or we are going to eat you. Yeah. The coolest part, and what is the name of it again? I got to make sure. Is some of them do such a good job of breaking them that those slaves become what are called savage souls, and they are thralls on the battlefield. Humans, other races.
So they're not transformed into gnolls.
They're not. They've just been so thoroughly broken that they regard their master as a god.
Holy shit, that's cool.
And so really cool. It immediately lends to an awesome skirmish where perhaps the big bad of this early level is one of these spirit breakers who's just become renowned for everyone he breaks. Reveres him as a god. He's that good. And to just be face down with mindless, savage humanoids, elves, humans, dwarves, as you lead into this kind of bigger and bigger. Cool. So some really cool stuff there. I want you to jump in because I know that, because
when you talk about these guys, I'm reminded of the Firefly Ravagers.
Yes,
that's what it first pops into my mind.
And I think actually there's a pretty good correlation there. I like that.
So that's what first pops to mind. If you want to start hopping in, man. Oh, I love Knowles. Knowles.
Knowles are awesome.
Because if I recall correctly, they're strongest behind a bow, which is weird to think about.
I mean, it's certainly. I mean, I think that they. I mean, mathematically are pretty. I mean, like you can't put them in a situation where they're not going to perform. But absolutely,
I thought that's their specialty.
Putting them behind a bow. I mean, there should be no encounter where you're running Knowles and some subset of them aren't happy to be totally unengaged and just slinging arrows.
Right. But what I love about, from a player standpoint, and this is, when you think about low-level creatures as a PC player, you're running against Kobolds, I think are really interesting, obviously, but they're fucking small. Cowards. Goblins. similar vein.
Right.
Knowles are 7 feet tall.
Right.
They're like, when you fucking kill a Knoll, you feel powerful.
Yeah.
And that's what I want.
Well, and I think they do such a good job, I guess, in the same way that an orc might deliver. But
I think they even a step above orc.
I think thematically, I completely agree. I mean, an orc is such an instantiated element into
great enemy. I don't mean to speak bad about
sci-fi,
it.
fantasy. I mean, virtually every one of them has an orc of some kind.
Right.
I have a hard time putting my finger on thematically what it is I love about them so much. Because even if they were just a dump in combat, even if they were they're still so fucking cool. They might have made my list. Maybe not number one, but
yeah.
I really do think that
like
you can take a group of Knowles. Well, one last little bit of lore before we round them out that I also really like is the lore revolving around, and I believe this comes from Volos, if I'm not mistaken, but the Witherlings. Which
those are raised guys?
Those are the ones that have been raised.
Yes.
But what I love is that the lore that they Rules as Written talks about is that there are some Knowles through imprudence or whatever path where the pack turns on them and they are devoured by the rest of the pack.
Yeah.
And those tend to be it's the hatred and the savagery that's been bound into that carcass that allows it to that allows
cool.
I mean, it's still generally a necromantic act or something,
right?
But it's just it also speaks to this sort of lawlessness, this
savagery.
Yeah, and I think
meat's back on the table, boys.
And I just think at low levels, another to speak to their versatility, another aspect that I really like is even in Rules as Written. Obviously, you could take any monster if you want to tweak it and make it a monster that the party can treat with. Excellent.
Okay.
But Rules as Written, there are some let's call them separatist nomadic tribes of Knowles that are, I don't know if you would say they're good, but they are not outright pillaging and and I think that it makes for a really interesting because like I said, I like them so much. I would love them in any capacity. I love them as especially if, let's say, it's a group of 8 Knowles who are and they are being hunted by the broader pack. What an awesome setup to really see both sides of that spectrum and then push your players into, now it's time to fight some fucking Knowles, but I'm hoping that Knowles as a number one threw you for a little bit of a curveball because
it did. I wasn't expecting so low of a CR rating, but I fucking love, I mentioned it, I was like, when I had to choose Kobolds, it was like I was like, oh,
I'm so glad you chose Kobolds because I'd rather have a conversation about both. And like I said, the cool part about this is I think we've got a pretty substantial spread. Like if you have a level 1 party all the way through probably a level 20 party, given that you have the solar in there and good
luck with that fight.
I think you could probably find something. You could find something on this list of 10 that you could throw at a party at any stage of their respective adventures.
And I like that they're not all super. Like, don't get me, mind flayers are like for sure, but there's a lot of these things that you don't really like. No, I don't think would be on a lot of other top 10s.
No, I think that
Flumph for life. Flumph.
Hey, drop the Flumph in the comment if you.
I'm gonna make a song about Flumphs.
I can't wait to hear it.
It's gonna be a techno remix.
Team Flumph or team?
What's your level 5? Gibbering Mouther. Yeah, I win.
Yeah, well, actually, I think Flumph probably is going to win out in that. But 4 against Flumps. Drop it in the drop it in the comments. No, to sign off today, I think we're going to do something a little bit different as well.
Yeah.
From myself, from everyone here at Modern Myth, I will let Josh do his own speaking. But this is episode 10. So we have been cooking along for a little bit now. We've got some really exciting stuff coming down the pipeline in DM and the PM. We always have exciting new episodes of Split Screen coming down the pipeline
Every week, baby.
We are less than 1 month away from the launch of the Rakish Rovers actual play.
I think it's going to be good.
Yeah,
I hope you guys enjoy it.
I'm stoked. We are currently driving. We are shooting 100 subs by launch. So if you are watching this right now on YouTube and you have not subbed,
Please.
if you think that's a journey you would like to take with us, click that sub, click that bell, click that like, drop a comment in the comment section. But more than anything, I think that as a episode 10, this is a huge thank you to everyone out there. On Twitter, I'm engaging with awesome people all the time. We're seeing some very nice spikes both on the podcast. We're seeing some spikes on the YouTube channel. We're seeing some. I mean, we're the community is awesome. It really is everyone at home. All of you guys who are showing up, liking the content, supporting us. That is keeping everything rocking.
Yeah.
Go ahead and whatever you've got and
yeah, absolutely. To echo, it's just it is. We were just like, hey, we like drinking beer and talking D&D. Let's just put this on the internet.
Let's do both.
Let's do both. And it's seems to be you guys are enjoying it, and it's amazing. Just the community of D&D is really cool.
We are only 10 listeners away from being at 100 listeners on the podcast, which is
that is unbelievable to me.
Which is really cool.
I'm glad you guys. All we do is this. This is our conversation. I'm just glad you guys are enjoying it.
Frankly, if the camera wasn't rolling, we'd probably be doing it anyways.
Yep. So it's just, it's awesome.
we really we hugely appreciate you guys. Thank you so much. I don't think we need any theatrics for this one. I just think from the both of us,
just thank you.
This one, huge thank you to all you at home. Cheers, brother.
Cheers.
Thank you for keeping the conversations exciting, and for being willing to put Flumps on, because I sure as hell wasn't going to. So I appreciate that.
Flumps for life, baby.
Thank you guys so much for joining us this time. Until next time,
the world is yours.